welcome to you all. We're back for another episode. Today it is Going Global. I'm Anne Leslie.
My name is Faith.
And I'm Faith.
And we are out of band. And in spite of all appearances, we are actually in sync. So this is another episode of raw conversations from real women in cybersecurity. We've been really encouraged by the feedback that we've had from a whole bunch of different people saying, love the authenticity, love the fact that it's a bit raw and rough around the edges, and we're going to keep on doing that. Today, though, we're doing something a little bit different, and we have our first guest.
Hi there.
Hey,
so, first of all, let's introduce the topic. For today, we wanted to switch it up a little bit because we are all internationals, or so to say. I am Dutch, but I'm working in an international environment. Anne is Irish, but she lives in France and also works in an international environment. Faith is a lovely Kenyan woman that speaks Russian and is also in an international environment working. And Jurgen is actually a fellow Dutchie who chose to work in Asia, basically. So that being said, Jurgen, could you please introduce yourself?
All right. Thank you for the introduction. And well, I think I'm your first guest, so thank you guys for inviting me. Yeah, my name is Jurgen, and I live in Singapore. Currently, I'm sitting in Singapore. It's now already, well, at the time of recording, it's now 6 a.m. or at least 6 p.m. already. So it's weekend now for me. And yeah, my background is security operations centers. I've been doing that, well, at least in IT, I've been working 11 years. And yeah, I think in line of the topic, right, in 2015, I decided to leave the Netherlands and basically move to Singapore. And after that, I basically did a lot of work in the APAC region. So I stayed in different countries for probably 6 to 9 months in a range of that. Yeah, ranging anything from Indonesia, Philippines, Korea, and left and right went to India, Vietnam, Thailand, etc. So there was a lot of international travel and a lot of cross-cultural experience. So yeah, I think that's a little bit my introduction. So, yeah.
Welcome.
Yay. Glad to have you.
So yeah, working in international environments, who would like to kick off? Pros, cons, experiences, what did you expect and what did you not expect, basically?
Okay. Yeah, so for me, it was a little bit of, I don't know, sometimes I play these battle royale games. You just jump out of the airplane and you land somewhere, and then when you're on the ground, you need to find your own way through it, and that was mostly my experience. I think the most value I've gotten as a little bit of a compass navigating this field was there is this book called the map or the cultural map.
Yeah.
And they basically have a series of spectrums where cultures sit upon. So I use that as a compass, basically coming in that situation and trying to sort of map things together as I went along. So and my lifeline mostly was that I speak business, content-based, very not ambiguous, as simple as possible in the English language that I command at the time. At least it was 2015. So and that basically was my compass, and on the other side my focus, and that's how I try to survive through a series of very complicated, I guess, cross-cultural environments. So that's a little bit the how I was going. So the con is it's quite challenging, and if you are not up to that kind of strong challenge on you, and you don't, it becomes difficult. So you need to think on your feet. That's one thing, and you need to also have a little bit of a higher social intelligence, or what they call EQ, emotional intelligence. I think that's what they quote. So that's definitely things that would help you in encountering that kind of con. And the pro for me, of course, was yeah, I just feel more refreshed when I'm talking to someone. It's not just like, oh, I'm in the Netherlands, I will be okay, you're doing this job, I'm doing this job. We're in a neutral situation, and yeah, after this you have your own life. But in Asia, I can always talk to anybody and always talk about culture, food, travel, it's much more interesting. You have always the ball rolling. I think maybe you guys relate to that in an international context. So that's basically my response to that, Jennifer.
Very good. And Faith, do you want to respond to it?
So
Yeah.
Go ahead, Faith, go ahead.
Yeah, for me, I think I was just looking for a place that was welcoming, right? And for me, it didn't really matter where I was going to land. Previously, I was in Russia and I did work in Russia for some time. And for me, what I was doing was good, but first of all, I think I wanted to be in an English speaking environment. Not that I don't speak Russian, but I didn't want to learn another language. Let's just say that. But now I'm learning Dutch. Hey. And the second thing is I wanted a place that I learned to be multicultural, because being in Russia, there was a lot of attention on myself because I'm different, right? There are not so many Africans out there. So I yes, as much as I appreciate people noticing you once in a while, but every single day it can be really tiring and annoying. So we wanted to move to maybe neutral ground with my husband, where I would also feel comfortable and he would also feel comfortable. So that's how we decided to move from Russia. And why did I land in the Netherlands? Well, I just during that time when I was doing interviews, Palo Alto Networks was hiring at that particular point, and I happened to go for the last round, where they actually bring the employee or the potential employee to the country so that you can have your final interview. And I was wowed. I was wowed by the fact that I could see people like myself around. So no one looked at me when I moved from Schiphol Airport to to the office and back. People didn't pay attention. And the fact that English was a language that was well spoken. They're very good at English, so I didn't necessarily need to learn another language, although for myself I prefer to learn the language of the people that I live near, so that I can fit in. So for me, it was just looking for a place that I can call home and be comfortable, and I found it here.
I kind of identify with something you said there, which is I came to France to finish college, and I had no intention of staying. Neither had I any intention of going back to Ireland, but life just kind of happened. And sort of 23 years later, I'm still here. In a lot of ways, being a foreigner, I kind of like that status, because for a whole bunch of reasons, I never really felt at home in Ireland. And it's easier to explain feeling different when you have the label foreigner, because people don't try to explain away, well, she's not like us. Oh, well, she's Irish. So I've been here long enough to have dual nationality, and there's a lot of stuff about France that I really, really like. But it doesn't matter how long I'm going to be here, I'm still never going to be French. There's just sort of social codes that you grow up with that are unwritten, and that I can only speak for myself, but I don't think I will ever fully master. There are sort of unspoken, unwritten rules of how you behave in certain contexts, and I still get them wrong.
I totally agree.
And sometimes, while I kind of revel in the freedom that comes with difference, there is something that you said, Faith, which is sometimes it's tiring, sometimes it's heavy, and sometimes I would just love to wrap myself up in a blanket of sameness, so that you can just, for a little bit of time, just blend and be, without it having to be, am I making mistakes in the language that I'm using? Because I kind of use like my language ability in French. I do kind of wear it like a badge of honor in some ways. I'm a bit of a grammar Nazi in English as well. I like language. Words are important, and I've always been really careful to not mess up somebody else's language. So speaking and writing French has always been really important to me, but it is a constant mental effort, right? Am I using the right word? Have I got that structure right? And that in itself is tiring. And it, particularly in France, where there are a lot of registers of language associated with certain contexts, associated with certain social classes, and mixing up the genre when you're using maybe a slang that comes from my kids in the suburbs in a very posh neighborhood in central Paris, that raises more than eyebrows.
Yeah.
So there's, you know, I don't think the difference is never fully eradicated, and I've had to get comfortable with there always being a bit of friction.
Yeah, I think I'll never really fit in completely within the Dutch, right? Because first of all, my Dutch sucks. That's the honest truth. And secondly, you're just different. But to be able to call a place home is all I was looking for. I think that I can settle for that. Yeah.
And would you? Sorry, Faith, continue.
If I wanted to completely fit in, then I should have been in Kenya, right? Yeah.
And so my question was then, do you feel the need to improve yourself and continuously and actually be able to speak the local language like in a perfect manner? Would you feel obligated to do that? And I'm asking this to the group.
I don't think it's an obligation. I don't think it's an obligation for me. For me, having spent almost 10 years in Russia, I found that people will be more open to you if you can speak their language. And I respect that. I don't expect people to come to my country and you know, disrespect me by not completely speaking my language. I don't think I will not be perfect. My Dutch will not be perfect, but you know, just trying to learn the language, show some respect for the people around you. And yeah, that's what I strive for.
Yeah.
I found that as well. I mean, in a personal context, totally, you know, having the ability to converse with people, it makes just relationship building, because that's one of the challenges I definitely found. I don't know whether it's been the same for you. I've noticed that my circle of friends, while I do have French friends, I tend to congregate with people who are also foreigners. They can be from anywhere. I mean, they can be Polish, they're German, some of them are Asian. But we seem to kind of find comfort in the company of people who are also struggling a little bit. And one of the things that, you know, gets talked about a lot in France is this notion of integration. You know, that France has big national level debates about immigration. How do we integrate other people? And I'm kind of on the fence on that, because I mean, I come from a country, Ireland, where Ireland has exported, it's a terrible term, but it's true. Ireland has exported generations of people since the Great Famine in sort of, you know, the 1845 and onwards. And we, you know, we, as a people, we tend to kind of build communities, diaspora in other countries, and we congregate together. And I just seen people who are foreigners in different places seem to find each other. And I have actually really struggled. It was through my kids in school that I managed to make French friends. But otherwise, and work, you know, work is a big integrating factor as well. School and work definitely helped. But when I was a stay-at-home mom, I think my social network was almost inexistent apart from immediate family. It's really tough.
Yeah.
I mean, Jurgen, I know that you, for example, studied, and correct me if I'm wrong, Cantonese? Or
Chinese Mandarin.
yeah, Mandarin, sorry,
Wow.
apologies. And you work and live in Singapore, which is known as one of the biggest expat nations. How do you experience those kind of things?
Yeah, you raised something along the lines of willing to improve. Well, I have on that spectrum, since I've been in different countries, some countries really force yourself to improve in the sense of you need to survive. Singapore is extremely comfortable. Like everything is English. And there's a lot of expat places around here. So I feel Singapore is very welcoming to expats. There's a huge chunk of expats that live in Singapore. I feel personally not that challenged in terms of trying to change. So that's definitely another challenge here. But I lived 2 years in total of my life in China, and yeah, in China there is no negotiation. Almost nobody speaks English, and I live primarily in second-tier cities. So second-tier cities generally is just not that international. So yeah, most of the problems that like you order food, someone comes to your door. Well, he tries to find the way to your door. He calls you on the phone, all in Chinese. No, good luck. So then I'm really, I need to try to survive and try to make the communication come across to let him find me right with the food. So that's a basic example of a challenge I would face in that kind of context. So that's not really by willingness, it's just imposed onto you. So yeah.
Yeah, I remember the first, I think the first several months in Russia, when I would go to the shop, I would always choose a shop that, displays the food, because I don't know how to order. And the only words that I knew as how to explain myself is I want this. So what eta? So that's the only thing I will say. I would go to the queue, and when it was my turn, she would ask me something, and then I'll be like, what eta? E eta. E eta. So I want this and this and this, and it was really challenging. And I think the beauty of being thrown into such an environment is that you're just forced to improve. I learned the language because I had no choice. No one was going to speak in English. My studies were all in Russian. I had to understand what was happening, so I had to learn the language. As opposed to the Netherlands right now, where everything is so comfortable, and I find it so difficult learning the language because everyone is just going to speak to me in English once they sense my accent. So
yeah, I guess that's also a trait of the Dutchies. If they know that you are more comfortable in speaking English, they will try to converse with you in English.
Yeah.
Plus, working in an international environment, that also kind of doesn't help with improving your local language skills, because
totally,
if it's English, then it's English, and that's way more comfortable then, basically.
I'd be curious, Jurgen, in Asia, right, and specifically in Singapore, beyond kind of the mechanics of sort of the words you're using, what have you noticed in terms of how you use words? And the types of communication, and then, I don't know, maybe hierarchy? Are there things that you learned the hard way, or, by trial and error, and kind of go, okay, that just doesn't work, or that does? Are there big cultural differences in the types of communication that are accepted and effective?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So I think of all, I just take the cultural map as a reference, right? So there's many spectrums on that, but there's two that are for me at least, was the biggest challenge. So there's one on high context communication and low context communication, so more on the content, so the spectrum. So I think the Dutch have a little bit of a disposition towards having a very content-based speech, saying like, this is it, and then not give context. So
I love it.
Yeah, so it's very effective. But when because I've been in Asia for a long while, it's almost natural for me to start talking about context. So I feel very comfortable in that language. Also, as an analyst, I like to talk about context first. But sometimes I come into an international situation where there's, let's say, a Western foreigner on the table, and then he asks me a question, and I go in, let's say, in the Asian style communication on the context, And then he's like, yeah, I don't
Give it to me
care.
straight.
Just give me the context. I'm like, I was like, wow, that's so, you know, like to switch between that per person to you're talking to is very challenging. So that was definitely a thing that was interesting. And the other one, yeah, hierarchy is, yeah, at least the Netherlands, the cultural disposition we have is very flat, right? So yeah, so I don't know who you
Very
are.
flat, direct, yeah.
So yeah, sometimes that didn't pan out. Also, I'm like in the context, I'm like, oh, okay. In the Asia context, you need to respect the hierarchy. Definitely, if there's a meeting, then you need to definitely stay quiet most of the time. And going directly over an official board of discussion and calling out a person or talking directly to a person, and then you need to address someone also with the right titles. Yeah, that's so I dropped the ball a couple of times on that one. So yeah, so I'm getting a little bit of a waiver because I'm still a Western foreigner and I look very distinct in the context. But those were really some challenging times that I had on that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
At least for me, that was not a really big challenge because I came from Russia where it's give it to me straight. I landed in the Netherlands where it's this. So I don't have to sugarcoat it, and yeah, I just fit in.
But it is interesting though if you work with different internationals. I mean, I am Dutch, and I know I've heard it more often than not that I'm quite direct in my communication, in my approach of styles. And
yes, you are.
Yes. And that sometimes does give friction with people because then they either find you too harsh or they wanted to have it a little bit more sugar-coated, or they feel even in some cases a little bit more offended because of the way that you bring certain information. Whereas you're like, I'm not trying to put it on you personally. I'm just trying to make it as clear for everyone as possible here right now.
Yeah. Yeah,
and unfortunately, yeah, I mean, that's not always welcomed, right? There are people who will absolutely love you for that. And there will be people who will condemn you to the end of the earth for that. It's very rarely you'll very rarely leave people indifferent. They'll either, you know, poles apart on the spectrum. But yeah, I think I should only go to Asia on holiday.
Or have a very good mentor.
Yeah. But what are the other, I mean, what are the other things that you found, you know, kind of, actually, we've sort of talked about, you know, the personal aspects, but we're in international environments. Do you often find yourselves in teams where there could be a whole bunch of different nationalities in a country, right? So, you know, Jurgen, you're Dutch in Singapore. That's already, you know, a melting pot of complexity. Have you got other nationalities around you where, you know, again, different levels of context, different levels of cultural norms?
Yeah. Oh, well, definitely. Well, Singapore by design has three major population groups together. And you have Tamilian Indian people, and then you have Malaysians, and then you have Chinese or Singaporean Chinese that are living there. So the largest majority is still Singaporean Chinese, but generally the three major groups know about each other. And yeah, on my daily calls, I'm generally sitting on 3 to 4 different nationalities, depending how it is. And that's mostly Indonesian, a Singaporean Chinese, I have someone I work closely with from Sri Lanka. So it's extremely mixed. Generally, then the bottom line is talk business, get to the point, and clear English. That's basically the common ground. So yeah, that's basically what you end up with, and try to be to the point as possible, and also as simple as possible in your communication. Yeah. That's one of the big things I learned also just in consulting. Don't use fancy words, just keep it simple diagram, not too much words, to the point. And that's how I mostly conducted myself. So yeah, challenges in that sense, yeah, there's always a communication challenge when someone is not as good or articulate in English. But then it's more of being practical, like, oh, maybe the colleague can just listen in, or let them type out what they want to say. Those are things that definitely help. Yeah, so I think, and for those people that really don't speak the language very well and cannot find the common ground, they will get forced also into learning it. So I remember hiring someone that wasn't I could, when I was interviewing him, half of the time, I think he understood me, and the other half, I think he was just going along. But I know he was a good guy.
Oh my.
Yeah. So after that, I know my colleague, of course, spoke in a native tongue to this person, and I think he vouched for him. And then after 1 or 2 years later, I met him again. I'm like, wow, your English really improved. I'm like, wow. So in an international environment, you get forced also. So from the other side also, right? From people that are just native in the country but get forced into an international company. So yeah, that was basically my takeaway from that. So, yeah.
And do you find it?
Sorry.
Sorry. Did you find it? Do you find it difficult sometimes to get feedback? You know, if let's say you're managing people, at least from the Asian side, do you find it difficult sometimes for them to open up and you know, give feedback about stuff?
Yeah. So yeah, well, the Dutch feedback spectrum is very easy. Bum in your face and unfiltered. So that is easy to understand and a little bit hard to take sometimes. But in Asia, I'm very, very aware of the feedback loop. So let's say in Indonesia, where I worked, when I'm in a meeting and I conduct the meeting at the end and I say, okay, are there any questions? The pattern I've seen is they don't go directly at me. Sometimes they first talk to each other in their own native tongue, and they negotiate or they have some discussion and say, oh, okay. And then they give me some feedback about what I'm saying. So that was I guess my experience in Indonesia. Korea, I felt there was a little bit more of, we're not going to go directly at you. You will hear it after the meeting from some other person. So,
okay.
Yeah. So different pathways. And I think generally it's a little bit hard to get feedback in general, because there's always this thing that, oh, I am the foreigner, so I'm from a different culture, I behave this way, so you should accept him. I don't know what they're thinking, honestly, and sometimes that's hard to get feedback on that stuff. So yeah, that is a hard challenge, and having a closed loop is very hard, definitely in a multicultural environment. So the bottom line is, at the end of the day, just be nice to people. That's mostly.
I think that's a very good advice to anyone, basically.
Yeah, it is for sure.
Plus, also just learning, I think, about the different cultures helps you survive a multicultural environment. Like, what do I expect when I'm talking to the people from the West, the Americans, for example? What do I expect when I'm talking to people from Asia? What are the expectations of people from Africa or from Europe, Eastern Europe? So just having, just Googling or learning a little bit about the cultures and how people behave does help be able to integrate well and coexist.
Yeah.
I just have a question out of curiosity, though, Jurgen. Like, one of the things that we said at the outset of these podcasts was, we are 3 women, right? That's sort of stating the obvious, but this was not meant, and it won't be, sort of feminist soapbox. But nonetheless, we are still kind of curious about teasing out issues around gender and inclusion, these kind of things. In the context where you are, lots of different cultures, complex environments, are there women there?
Okay. So I hired also teams specifically in security operations centers across the region, and so I can give you some insight on that at least. First of all, I thought the previous podcast quite insightful. At least you guys were sharing your experiences in the past. So I thought that that was a very interesting insight. At least I never heard that kind of conversation so out in the open. So that gave me definitely some insight. What I have seen here in the region is that, let's say, Indonesia is a country that is a little bit more Islamic, or is an Islamic nation, and that brings out different prioritization on, or at least on the spectrum of equality, a different disposition. So what I have observed in cybersecurity specific, when I hire, give me resumes, and at this point in time, I have never seen a female resume pop up in my view. So you're talking to one person. I only have a limited data set. There's probably females out there that are doing the job, but in that context, I didn't see much. What I've seen, let's say in the Philippines, I think of 10 people that the team we hired, I think 3 or 4 were female, definitely also. So Philippines, on the other hand, is definitely definitely more diverse. So that was one aspect. I saw Thailand also more diverse. Yeah. Okay. So I need to be also politically correct. What I understand, and with my limited understanding of the Asia context, is that there are certain countries where there are females that need to take up the role in the household more stronger due to the household situations. And because of that push in those households, specifically what I understand in Thailand and Philippines, those females get more empowered and push more to the front, and they're definitely more stronger. That's what my observation is. Yeah, Korea, we hired also, I remember, some females, and there is a different dynamic where all the guys need to go to national service for 2 years, while most females don't need to do that, and they can start with a career earlier on. So they might have an advantage already in a new emerging field like cybersecurity. So I guess these are a little bit the viewpoints I have on this topic. I don't know if you want to pry into any of those, or what specifically you want to know.
No, I mean, just Jennifer and Faith, I was not just curious about it, right? In terms of, I think something I've noticed in Western economies is that on a lot of topics, we have I get into trouble for saying this, but I'll screw it, I'll say it anyway. We have a kind of a complex of superiority on a lot of things, thinking that we are more advanced. I've seen it when I used to work in banking, right? We used to think that we had a much more sophisticated banking and payment system. But when you look at sort of more emerging economies, because they have to find a way to do stuff, they do. And they're very, very creative. And I have seen, and I can't remember top of mind which country it was, but there are countries that are labeled less developed. But in some ways, women actually are managing to jump into cybersecurity in particular.
I mean, a big example of this is, for example, India. In Europe, and I'm going to generalize this a little bit. For example, STEM education, so technical education or technically inclined educations, are viewed more as suitable, I would say, almost for men. Whereas in India, it doesn't really matter if you want to go into cybersecurity or if you want to go into a technical job, because that on average pays usually more, then it doesn't really matter if you're a male or female. Whereas in Europe, to speak from my viewpoint, for example, I got a lot of discouragement when I announced after high school that I wanted to go into IT or wanted to study IT. And the most heard comment that I got was like, do you really think that that's a smart idea? I mean, you're a girl.
And I think it's also about, the privilege, I guess, with the emerging economies, like also, Kenya, you have no choice, right? You have to have the papers. Here, I was surprised to hear people, not surprised now, but there are people who are actually in managerial positions without diplomas, without that type of education. In Kenya, that is not really possible. It's unless you know someone who knows someone. You can only get in there with proper papers, and without an education, there's not much that will come of you. So for us, we really value that. Here, I think it's, you can get it or not, but you'll still make it in life.
It's a choice.
For me, I didn't have that choice. I had to get my papers. And that's why I still value education until today. I don't play with it.
Question for you, Faith, just curiosity, like what prompted you, well, actually both of you, Jennifer, I know your story a little bit more though. What prompted you, Faith, to go to that sort of technical direction? Because there were so many things that could have sent you in a different direction, and yet you went that one.
Sorry, my lighting is playing with me, but in school, I was rather good in physics and chemistry. And so for me, it was just logical that I would probably go into engineering. And the reason as to why I had, I had either engineering, law, or medicine as the options, because that's basically what I knew at that time. And yeah, due to the fact that I was stronger in physics, chemistry, it made sense that I would go into engineering. But how exactly, or why exactly did I land in telecommunication engineering? For me, it's not that I chose to land in that. There was a list of scholarships. I needed a scholarship because I didn't have people to pay for that. So I needed a full scholarship, and the Russian government has like a list of open slots in their universities. And based on that, I just chose Imi, Mini, Mini, Mo, landed in telecommunication engineering, and then pivoted from there.
Yeah, the random nature of the universe. It's kind of crazy, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And what of you, Jennifer?
I did make a conscious decision, partially because I'm headstrong as blank. But yeah, no, I always loved to tinker with computers, and I got that from my father. Like I probably mentioned this already before, but he always had like the latest model of the computers, and I got always his like downgrade stuff to play around with. The thing is that though I am not technically inclined, and I also mentioned this before, I have dyscalculia. So if I do anything with numbers, I'm just gonna F it up, because it just doesn't make sense for me in my head. But I love computers and I wanted to continue in that. So I basically looked for whatever was possible in the Dutch education system, figured out the appropriate level that I could go into based on what I did in high school. And I took a leap of faith, and I did first my managerial vocational education. After that, I did my bachelor's degree, and after that, I did my master's degree. So yeah, for me, it was a very conscious decision. It was a bit of a different and difficult route, but I'm very happy that I chose it. And I met awesome people along the way.
And actually,
That's
one
really
of the things, it is, isn't it? But actually, one of the things, just hearing you all talk, I remember when I was younger, my family was just big on sport. And I remember my mum saying to me, practice a sport and get good enough that you can use that as your common language to fit in somewhere. Because it's I don't know if it's a cultural thing in Ireland, sport is a big kind of community builder, integration factor. And we were always told, with my sister and my brothers, practice a sport, because no matter where you go, you'll be able to use that as a way of fitting in. And it's true in a lot of ways. I sort of played field hockey for a long time, and that was one of the things that helped me try and rebuild a circle of friends in France. But I think talking about, Jurgen, you were talking about communicating clearly, no jargon. And I think maybe it's sort of that language, that core expertise, domain expertise, and a language, a way of communication that kind of builds a bridge no matter where we go. That kind of foundation of knowledge probably would allow us to slot in anywhere, sometimes more or less comfortably, but it is almost like a kind of an Esperanto in some ways, because we're trying to come up with similar outcomes. The priorities might be a bit different, the tactics of how we go about it, but I think there's something very shared in cybersecurity and the domain that no matter where we go, we could probably find a way of finding a spot for ourselves.
Yeah, true. Jurgen, how did you get into cybersecurity?
Okay, well, that's a little bit of a life story, but at least when I was very, very young, my mother was unfortunately sick when I was younger. So mostly I stayed at home taking care of her. So that's basically what happened. And my dad worked in IT already. I think he worked, I don't know how many years. I think he was in 86 or something. And he started at Digital. Digital became Compaq and became HP, etc. So yeah, he had computers at home. So I guess that's how I rolled into it. So because of my mother's sickness, I mostly stayed at home, and I got some money when I was quite young to buy a little bit of a fancy computer. And so I had a computer on my room. So yeah, that's mostly how I grew up with computers. So yeah, when I was 14, 15, I mostly spent my time behind the computer. I was not really a gamer. I was mostly focusing on watching movies, that kind of stuff. So that sort of brought me in one period of my time into a little bit of a darker side of the internet. I guess so. Yeah, it's already more than 50 years ago, so I can. It doesn't really matter under the Dutch law, at least. But that's how I learned. That's how
You're
I
in Singapore.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'm on the run also. Yeah, but I still have my Dutch passport, so you never know. Yeah, so that's basically how I rolled into cybersecurity. So yeah, you guys have definitely seemed to be more challenges along with me. For me, it was very natural, and for me, it was always the only challenge I had. I was put in a very in a basic school that was for difficult learning children because my parents thought I was difficult learning, but I didn't have challenges there. So at the end, I just ended up going to the lowest angle of high school after that, and then I need to fight my way up to MBO, HBO. These are at least the levels we have in the Netherlands. So that
same
was really
track as I did, basically. Yeah.
So the rest was all very easy for me because it was just, oh, I love IT. I just do work on IT. It's easy. So mostly it's been like that most of my life. So in that sense, I don't have challenges like you guys have in the past. So yeah, so that's a little bit of my background.
Yeah, sometimes it's rather embarrassing when people, are always talking about how they've played with computers from when they were born, and I'm like, I was playing outside.
No, that's also a good thing. Trust me.
My first computer, my uncle had his computer, but it was only it was, I think, a ThinkPad, an old ThinkPad, and it was only for work. So once in a while, he would allow me to go and play solitaire on it. But other than that, I actually got my first computer when I was 19, when I moved to Russia, because my uncle gave me his old ThinkPad to go with to study. Yeah.
Still work
and
well.
yeah, it helps. So I guess the question is, what would be our advice to people who are contemplating moving their countries, or moving for their career? What do you think?
Or working in an international environment, because there are also still a lot of people that just stick within their own group bubble of nationality, basically.
Yeah. What's the recommendation? Who wants to go first?
Well, I can comment that, but that's more on how would you land a job, because that's more practical. But before we get into that, I guess well, if you want it, you can get it. That's basically it. That's what I tell people also. I wanted it, and I was able to get it, but I was I'm very logical and I looked very much in the future to do my planning. So so then to get into how to land a job. So, okay, what I found in Asia, most people I spoke to when I want to go to Singapore in 2015, they already knew someone there that pulled them in, because Asia is all relationship centric. So I was hoping I would get in like that, but it never happened. That was extremely difficult. So I didn't have any relationship. So my strategy was very simple. Okay, you start at this time. So I think it was 2014, 1 year before I went, configured all these alerts for jobs, specifically Singapore and Hong Kong at the time. Every day I got an email of jobs. So I stopped monitoring this job environment. And then later, 8 months in, I just wrote up my resume. And in the meantime, I got 2 certifications. Like I tried to angle it from 2 ways. Either I'm a generalist with certified ethical hacker and CISP. And the other side, I tried to go the specialist route with ArcSight. At that time, I was an SIM specialist. So I used 4 certifications in that domain. So I tried to do it like a T specialism. And that's basically that. With my resume, I just started applying like a crazy person. I think up to 100
every day,
jobs I applied. Yeah, for a month. And then I said, as a tagging, I will come to Singapore 3 weeks later, and I'm available from that time to do in-person interviews. So that's what I did. And then I still have my job at that time. I didn't quit. I was very risk averse. So then I just went in, and I was lucky to get a bunch of interviews, 3 main companies that were interested, and they all provided offers, all 3. And at the end, I just picked one, and then I went back to the Netherlands, and then I say, okay, I'm gonna quit my job, and then throw out all my stuff, because just 2 suitcases, and then take all my stuff and went to Singapore basically, and left most things behind. That's basically the story that happened. So there's a lot of detailed strategies I did. I tried to do my own blog in advance. I tried to do more activity on LinkedIn. I tried to be active in the user community of the RSci community to get more international presence. In the end, most of these things didn't really, they contributed to more credibility, but the one that landed me the job at the end of the day, specifically in Singapore, connect with the right recruiter in the right domain, and they will give you the ticket to the job you need. That was my lesson learned from that whole thing. And I tried everything. Like I have a whole PowerPoint to tell you this. I did everything. So this is really my lesson learned on that topic. So I guess that's more my advice for people that want to move abroad, at least in the Singapore region where I sit now. So.
Thanks for sharing, Jurgen. Really.
Yeah. Anne, do you want to go next?
So I think my building on that, I wish I'd had such a structured approach. Man, God, life would have been so much easier if I had that. But so if I was to do it over, I would do that. Plus, just arm myself with resilience and as much open-mindedness as possible. So, you know, one of my kind of learnings from when I decided I was staying in France was getting to the realization after tears of frustration, trying to get paperwork sorted out, trying to kind of just get the mechanics of daily life in place, realizing France is not going to change for me. So if I want to stay here, it's up to me to adapt and adjust to it, because it's not going to happen the other way around. And it sounds really stupid, but I battled against it and I complained about it and moaned about it, but that's just wasted futile energy. So going to a place, it is what it is. And it may be imperfect. There may be things that you don't like about it, but then if you really don't like it, don't go there.
Yeah.
And just that expectation of don't expect the place to change for you.
Yeah. If you go to the Romans, do what the Romans do.
Yeah.
Jennifer, want to go next?
Oh, sure. So for me, like I mentioned before, I'm the only one of this group that didn't move abroad. But throughout my entire professional career, which is now 6 years, I would say almost, I've made the conscious decision to work only in international environments, because for me, that really stimulates the way I think, the interactions that I have with people, the creativity that I get from it. So if there is one thing I can say to encourage people to pick that up, and as a recommendation to deal with, I would say have an open mind, because people from different backgrounds, people from different experiences, people with different nationalities will always have just that little different approach to things than you will have. And either you can fight against it, be very frustrated and annoyed with that, or you can just accept it and see that either sometimes it's a better approach to things, or just say, okay, let's do it this way this time, and next time we do it my way.
Yeah. And I think for me, adding on to what Jurgen said, you know, get your certifications. I know there are people who are like, boo to certification. Get your certification. Being a girl, being a Black girl in this industry, I know you need your certifications. It doesn't matter. And just apply vigorously. And one thing I think I wanted to add is, if you get that first job that lands you in that country, don't think that that is your last, right? Most of the times, one thing that I learned when I moved into the Netherlands is, most of the times, different countries are graded in, they have like different salary ranges for people coming from different countries. So for example, Jurgen moving into Singapore probably got a bigger paycheck than someone from the Philippines moving into Singapore, an example. So the very first job that you land in the country, look at it as your entrance job. It doesn't necessarily, if you're lucky, it will be a very good job. that you will love and you will stay there for a very long time. But most of the people use it as a pivoting point. And don't be scared that, don't be scared of the visa. Once you get in, it is easy to change employers without a problem. Yeah, so I think those are my tips. And obviously, as Anne said, you're going to people's backgrounds, right? Backyards. So don't expect them to fit into your culture. You try to fit into their culture. If you cannot hack it, then don't go there.
I think those are all nice words. That being said, I think we're almost at the end of our conversation. Do we have any last thoughts, things that we want to mention, things that we want to have out in the open before leaving?
Any more words of wisdom? I'm good. I'm all out.
I'm drained.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think generally, if people want to work abroad, they should definitely do it. So I studied a little bit of psychology in my free time in the past, and there is this hierarchy of Maslow, and at the top there is self-actualization. And self-actualization really only, I think, expresses itself the best if you are put in situations where either there's high pressure or you're putting different contexts all the time, and that shines different lights on you as a person. Even for me, traveling a lot, being in all these international contexts, I found out also things about myself that I probably wouldn't have even see that from that side if I wasn't in those international contexts. In the Netherlands will be probably a pretty standard way of living, and you will never learn that about yourself. So that's basically my biggest, at least for me, the biggest reason to go abroad, to self-actualize myself and express, or at least show what's inside my soul, right? To sort of very very spiritual. But that was basically the key point. So the only thing is, every time I did a jump, because I jumped multiple times, I went from the Netherlands to Singapore, and after Singapore 3 years, I quit my job to study Chinese, and then I went to China. So, and then I went back, and then every time when I did my jump, people said, "I wish I was like you, like do that." And I'm like, "But you can't do it. I don't know why you're not doing it." So that was always my I don't know why are always people saying me the same thing? And that was two different countries, completely different ethnicities of people talking to me, and they said the same thing. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess that's
scary for some people.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. So that was my words of wisdom, I guess.
I think one thing that we might have forgotten is it's not okay. Just because they say that it's possible to move into other countries, it's not easy. It is completely not easy. You're basically leaving your family, you're leaving all the friends that you know back home. So you're going to start from scratch. In the beginning, you will have your honeymoon period whereby you're so, wow, I love this country and everything. And then there'll be the shebang where you're like, what the hell am I doing here? And it just takes, you just need to know what exactly you're doing it for. And if you have the end goal in mind, it'll be easier to handle stuff. The friends will eventually show up eventually, but in the beginning, it's not easy at all.
It's kind of like the Gartner hype cycle, right? You kind of go, peak expectations down into the trough of disillusionment, and then hopefully you don't bow out when you're down at the bottom of that and just go, screw this, I'm going home. And if you manage to get through that and kind of go on to that slope of enlightenment, which I think ties nicely into what Jurgen was saying about, self-actualization, where we're pushed out of our comfort zone into situations and contexts where we need to be a bit inventive about ourselves and maybe discover things about ourselves that we didn't know before.
Cool.
That ties a little bit in my background, as you can see, because there's a
threat detected.
It's ups and downs.
It's like, but the only way is up, apparently, which is great.
Once you're up, you can relax and lounge. Okay. Are we good for today?
think we're good for today. It's a great conversation. Thanks for joining us, Jurgen.
Perfect. Then Jurgen, I want to thank you so much for today. You're my dear friend, and I'm very thankful that you're willing to be our first guinea pig guest.
Very good. Thank you, guys.
That being said, to our viewers, if you like the content, feel free to like and subscribe. If you want to be like Jurgen and be a guest on our setting, please let us know. Contact us through LinkedIn or any other type of measurements. And yeah, see you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.